What's up? Welcome back to another chilling chapter. Before we dive into today's twisted mystery, Nero Wolfe and the patient who wasn't sick, it hit me up. What made you smile today? And where in the world are you listening from? I'm featuring your stories in the next drop, so don't be shy. Now grab your tea, dim the lights, and get ready, because nothing in Whispers in the Fog is ever what it seems. Chapter 1. The Visitor Who Didn't Limp. I was halfway through my third coffee when the doorbell rang, and for once it wasn't a process server, a cop with a fedora, or a woman claiming she needed help finding her cat. Those types are Wolfe's favourites. Low effort, high drama. But today's guest came in smooth, sharp, and strange enough to stir even Nero Wolfe from his mid-morning book. She was tall, maybe 5'10", in heels, with a face sculpted like a department store mannequin, but eyes that told me she could name every poison in a pharmacy cabinet. Her outfit, navy blue jacket, matching skirt, cream blouse with a gold brooch at the throat, said Upper West Side money, but her nerves weren't buying it. She held her handbag like it contained a time bomb. "Miss," I said, holding, the door open but staying rooted. "If you're selling religion, I already gave. If it's vitamins, we're full up. But if you're here to hire Nero Wolfe, then congratulations. You've found the one place in Manhattan where an orchid has a better shot at getting his attention than a crisis." She blinked, hesitated, then stepped inside. "My name is Lillian Corbett. I need your employer's help. It's urgent. They always say that." I took her coat, offered her a seat in the front room, and buzzed Wolfe's office. "We've got a visitor. She's urgent. Her name's Lillian Corbett." There was silence for a beat, the kind Wolfe saves for pretentious waiters and politicians. Then, 10 minutes, Archie. She may enter after I finish feeding the cypripediums. Clicked off. "You're in luck," I told her. "The master is mid-orchid, which means you have just enough time to decide whether you want to walk out of here or tell him something worth more than the aroma of potassium nitrate." She sat, legs crossed, eyes fixed on the parquet floor. After a minute, she spoke. "I believe someone is trying to kill my husband. That got my attention." "Okay," I said, leaning forward. "That's a classic. But let's skip the part where you say you can't prove it and jump to why you think so." She swallowed, eyes flicking to the clock on the wall. "Because he's dying, slowly, and no doctor can tell me why. They say there's nothing wrong with him, but I see him every day. He's getting thinner, weaker. Something's eating him away, and it's not in his blood work or his x-rays." "Maybe stress. Business trouble?" "No," she said. "He works in finance. Quiet, predictable. But his personality changed. He forgets things. He's paranoid. Last week he tore apart our medicine cabinet convinced someone had switched his pills. But he doesn't take any pills. Psych eval? He refuses. Says it's all real, that someone wants him gone." I paused. Wolfe had solved murders with less to go on. Hell, he once exposed a killer because a salad had the wrong kind of vinaigrette. But this, no body, no poison, no crime scene, just a wealthy woman and a husband who may or may not be losing his mind. That was a tougher pitch. Still, I've learned not to judge the book until Wolfe has finished reading the blurb. "Come on," I said. "Let's give him something to growl about." I led her into the office. Wolfe sat behind his desk like a sultan of deduction. wrapped in his mustard-coloured house jacket. The orchids had been fed, and now it was time to feed his brain. "Wolf," I said, "this is Mrs. Lillian Corbett. She says her husband is being murdered invisibly." Wolf grunted. "Invisibly is not a word I admire, Mrs. Corbett. Do sit. Be plain." She sat. Her fingers clutched the bag again, white-knuckled. "My husband, Dr. Andrew Corbett, is not physically ill, or so every doctor claims. But over the last 3 months, I've watched the man wither. At first I thought it was nerves. Now I believe someone is deliberately weakening him, quietly, so that when he finally collapses, no one will call it foul play." Wolf's eyes narrowed. "And what led to this conviction, madam?" "He's a man of routine. For 18 years he's been dependable, punctual, healthy. Then suddenly, insomnia, confusion, nausea. His breath smells metallic, and he's lost 20 pounds, but no diagnosis, just dismissal. I think whoever is doing this is counting on subtlety." Wolf shifted in his chair. "Does he have any enemies?" She shook her head. "He's a psychiatrist. Most of his clients are harmless, anxious socialites, Wall Street types who can't sleep without barbiturates. No stalkers, no blackmail. At least, not that he's told me." Wolf flicked his fingers toward the decanter. I poured him a glass of beer. He sipped, thinking. "Madam," he said, "my business is not to diagnose diseases, nor is it to challenge the conclusions of competent physicians. If your husband suffers from a somatic illness undetected by modern tools, it may well be tragic, but it is not my concern. However, if you are correct and foul play is involved, it may yet manifest." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a slim silver pen, a Mont Blanc. "Yesterday he gave this to me. Said, 'If anything happens, tell someone about the patient who wasn't sick.' Then he passed out in the middle of dinner." Wolf's brow rose. "Patient who wasn't sick." I nodded. "Sounds like code." Wolf turned to me. "Archie, visit Dr. Corbett. Observe him, discreetly. Learn the truth of his condition. Then inquire about his patients, friends, and staff. If there is an invisible killer, he may leave behind a visible trail." "To do that, I'd need an address," I said. Mrs. Corbett handed me a card. On it was printed Dr. Andrew Corbett, Private Psychiatric Practice, 311 East 66th Street, Suite 7B. "And," she added, "if you find anything, I don't care what it costs. Just don't let him die, thinking no one believed him." She left with more dignity than most of our clients manage, which, in my experience, usually means she was either telling the truth or rehearsed in front of a mirror. Wolf closed his eyes. A man who suspects he is being murdered, and whose wife believes him. Intriguing. Go, Archie, and tread carefully. The mind, when tampered with, may be more dangerous than dynamite. And just like that, I was off. Into a mystery with no murder, no suspect, no motive. Just a dying man who wasn't supposed to be sick. Which meant, of course, that he probably was. Just not in the way anyone expected. Chapter 2. The Man Behind the Mirror. If you ever want to see what upper tier paranoia looks like, walk into a private psychiatrist's office on the Upper East Side and tell the receptionist you're not there for an appointment, especially if you're carrying a leather notebook, a smile that doesn't reach your eyes, and the scent of questions in your wake. The receptionist a brunette with the kind of hair that made me suspect she moonlighted for Saks, looked me up and down like I'd walked in covered in fire ants. "Do you have an appointment with Dr. Corbett?" "Nope," I said cheerfully, "but I do have a reason. Personal, not professional. Tell him it's about something he said to his wife last night, regarding a patient who wasn't sick. I'll wait." Her mouth tightened into a line you could have scored a ruler with, but she picked up the phone, whispered, paused, whispered again, then looked back at me. "He's finishing with someone. If you'd like to wait, he'll see you shortly." I took a seat and studied in the waiting room. Glass-topped table, neatly stacked psychology journals, abstract art on the walls in 3 shades of expensive grey. This wasn't a place for crisis management. It was a gallery of controlled disintegration. 10 minutes later, the inner door cracked open and a man stepped out. He looked like he'd recently lost a fistfight with insomnia. Tall, narrow-shouldered, with a pale complexion and skin that sagged like wet paper around the jaw. His suit had once fit him. Now it hung loose, the collar gaping slightly. I stood. "Dr. Corbett?" He blinked at me, then nodded. "Yes. Who are you?" "Archie Goodwin. I work with Nero Wolfe." I watched him carefully. At the name, his eyes flickered. Recognition and something else. Relief, maybe, or dread. "My wife sent you." "She did. Said you weren't sick, but you were being poisoned. In the literary sense, if not the chemical." He exhaled. "Come in." His office was warmer than the waiting room, more lived in. Mahogany bookshelves sagged with tomes, medical and otherwise. A large window faced the street, though the blinds were drawn halfway. The room smelled faintly of old paper, faint cologne, and something sterile underneath, like antiseptic lingering behind the wood polish. He motioned for me to sit in the leather chair across from his desk. "I'm not mad," he said abruptly, "or at least no more than the average man working 12 hours a day listening to people unravel themselves." "Good to know. Wolfe doesn't do ghosts or psychosis. He solves crimes." Corbett leaned back. "That's exactly why I asked Lillian to reach out. There's something happening to me. It's not physical. Or if it is, it's beyond the scope of anyone I've seen. But I feel as though someone is dismantling me. Start from the beginning." He rubbed his temple. "It began 3 months ago. First, fatigue. Not normal. Tired. I mean an aching disorientation, like I was walking through glue. Then memory gaps. I'd forget where I parked or if I'd taken notes after a session, but only on certain days. Others were perfectly clear, like someone was tampering with my hours." "Any pattern?" He hesitated. "Wednesdays and Fridays. That's when I'd feel the worst." I made a note. "Those are your busiest days?" "No, they're actually lighter. I only take 3 patients each on those days." "Names?" He shifted. "That's confidential." "Doctor, I'm not a cop, but if someone's trying to erase your life by the hour, I need to know who has access to those hours." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Wednesday. Ruth Denning, Gordon Bell, and Mr. E. That's what he writes on his intake. Refuses to give a full name. Friday. Mrs. Lavery, Jonas Licht, and... He stopped. His face drained further. "And Lillian." "Your wife?" He nodded slowly. She began sessions under another name, insisted it was a matter of therapeutic neutrality, said she wanted to explore her own grief without the burden of being the wife of the doctor. I agreed, foolishly. You think she's involved? I don't know, but she's not telling me everything, and I don't remember some of those sessions at all. Now we were getting somewhere. Any staff besides the front desk brunette who sized me up like expired prosciutto. He allowed a thin smile. Marjorie Klein. Efficient, precise. She's been with me for years. And at home, cook, maid, butler with a limp and a grudge, no live-in staff. We have a cleaning lady twice a week. Lillian oversees the home. Leaned forward. Tell me about the pen. That got a real reaction. His fingers twitched, and he dropped his gaze to the desk. It wasn't just a message. It's a recorder. He reached into a drawer, pulled out a second pen, a match to the one his wife had shown us, and clicked the top. A small red light blinked. I started using it 2 months ago. I was afraid I'd forget things I said. So I began recording myself. Meetings, notes, even arguments. Did you record any of the sessions you can't remember? He nodded. But one was missing when I checked last week. Fridays. Who would have had access? Only me and Lillian. I stood. Dr. Corbett, you've given us just enough to chew on. But here's the thing. I don't know yet if you're being poisoned, gaslit, hypnotized, or simply coming undone the slow way. But Wolf will want to listen to that pen. All of it. And he'll want to meet your wife again. Not just the version that came in our door yesterday. Corbett rubbed his eyes. Is this the part where you warn me not to trust anyone? No, I said, heading for the door. This is the part where I tell you to sleep with the light on. And don't drink anything unless you pour it yourself. I stepped out. Marjorie gave me a look over her clipboard that could have chilled bourbon. I tipped my hat and left. The street outside was busy with cabs and overcoats. I lit a cigarette and thought about the man I'd just met. Something about him felt genuine. But genuine didn't mean safe. If Wolf was right, and he usually was, then someone was rewriting Corbett's life page by page. And if I had to bet, the next page would be written in blood. Chapter 3. A memory worth stealing back at the brownstone. I found Nero, Wolf in the plant room, holding a Vanda coerulea orchid with the same reverence most people reserve for holy relics or vintage claret. I waited until he'd finished whatever silent orchid prayer he was offering, then cleared my throat. He didn't look at me. You've spoken to Dr. Corbett? I have. He's pale, shaken, and scared in that expensive, understated way that says he hasn't cried since prep school, but might know if you handed him a bill from the wrong tailor. Wolf gave the faintest nod. Details, Archie, and be thorough. I filled him in. Corbett's fatigue, the memory gaps tied to specific days, the pen recorder, the mysterious Mr. E, and the fact that his wife was also a patient under an alias. Wolf finally turned, eyes narrowing behind his round spectacles. Should he furnish the missing audio file? No. He only discovered it was missing last week. Someone erased it, either at the office or after he brought it home. Bah! If his suspicions are correct, then tampering with his memory is merely one tactic in a more elaborate game. Who benefits from his collapse? That's the million-dollar question. and I'd like to know how often patients have turned their psychiatrists into victims. Wolf pursed his lips. Rare, but not implausible. Such relationships are built on trust and psychological access. Fertile ground for manipulation. He motioned for me to follow him into the office, where Fritz had already set out his afternoon beer. Wolf lowered himself into his chair like a king returning to his throne, then steepled his fingers. We must begin cataloguing possibilities. If Dr. Corbett's ailment is not physiological, it is either psychological or environmental. Perhaps both. Consider this. Wednesdays and Fridays. Why those days? Same 3 patients per day. Only overlap is his wife. You think she's doing it? I think she's hiding something. That is not the same thing as guilt. But a wife who books therapy sessions under a false name and then claims her husband is being quietly destroyed, either a liar or the rarest of witnesses. One whose perception exceeds that of the victim. You want me to look into the patients? Precisely. Begin with Ruth Denning and Gordon Bell. Ascertain who they are, what they do, and why they might see Corbett. Look for connections between them, and to Lillian, if any exist. He waved a hand dismissively, and get the front office schedule from Marjorie Klein. I want to know if anyone else, delivery men, assistants, cleaners, was present on those specific days. Right. What about Mr. E? Find him. Wolf, I said, leaning against the doorframe. You do realize that tracking down a patient who refuses to give his full name is like playing darts in the dark while someone's moving the board. Then light a match, he replied smoothly. Finding Ruth Denning wasn't hard. She worked at the Museum of Modern Art in the Archives Department and had a reputation for throwing shade at curators who miscategorized abstract expressionists. Her apartment was in Gramercy, her rent controlled, and her voice, when I phoned pretending to be confirming an appointment, was dry as gin without the olives. Dr. Corbett doesn't normally reschedule, she said. Is something wrong? Just a scheduling shuffle, I replied. You've been seeing him regularly? Every Wednesday at 2 for the last year and a half. And how's he doing lately? A pause. Excuse me? I mean, does he seem off, distracted, tired? She hesitated, then. He seemed a bit remote last time. He forgot my session notes, which was unlike him, and he kept glancing at the clock. But that's not your concern. Oh, but it is. Thanks. I hung up before she could start asking questions of her own. Next was Gordon Bell, an advertising executive at a mid-size firm in Midtown, whose idea of discretion didn't extend to his social media. His Instagram had photos of martinis, his dog, and one blurry image of a man I suspected was Corbett, taken from across a table at what looked like a bistro on East 58th. The caption, "Great session, clearer already." I called the firm's main line and left a message for Bell under a pseudonym. He called back 2 hours later, voice smooth, rehearsed, and a little too chipper. I heard you're checking up on Andrew. Everything okay? He's going through something, I said. Have you noticed anything unusual lately? Not really. Well, maybe once, last Friday, he repeated a question I'd already answered, like he hadn't heard me the first time. But that happens. The man's under pressure. Pressure from what? Bell laughed. From listening to people like me whine about our childhoods. Seriously, is this official? Are you family? Let's just say I'm part of the clean-up crew. Thanks for the chat. When I got back to the brownstone, Wolf was mid-chess match, against no one. A trick he uses when he wants to think, but won't admit he's thinking. Well, he asked without looking up. Ruth says he forgot her notes. Gordon says he repeated questions. Both confirm something's off. No red flags, but something smells smoky. Not yet flame, Wolf murmured, but smoke suggests fire, and the erasure of memory in isolated segments is not the work of incompetence. It's the intention. Which means, I said, someone's not just trying to confuse Corbett. They're trying to remove something specific. A memory. Wolf nodded. Find out what that memory was, or who would benefit from it vanishing. Should I pull Lillian back in for round 2? Not yet. She plays coy. I want her caught off guard. He sipped his beer, eyes narrowed. And Archie, do not underestimate the front desk girl. Marjorie. I suspect she hears more than she lets on. Understood. I left the office and stepped into the hallway. The brownstone suddenly felt smaller, like the walls had drawn in an inch. That usually meant Wolf was ahead of me on the board. But he hadn't won yet. And if the killer, or whatever this was, had gone through, the trouble of stealing a man's mind piece by piece, they wouldn't stop now. They couldn't afford to. Chapter 4. The Memory Thief's Secretary. The next morning I put on my cleanest tie, the one that said harmless consultant instead of private snoop, and headed back to the 311 East 66th Street. My target wasn't Corbett this time. It was Marjorie Klein, the receptionist with the perfect hair and frostbite-level politeness. Wolf was right. Anyone who manned a psychiatric office 5 days a week knew more secrets than a confessional booth, even if they didn't admit it. She was at her desk, flipping through a schedule book with one hand and sipping black coffee with the other. Her eyes lifted the moment I stepped through the door. No smile. Back again, Mr. Goodwin. You remembered, I said brightly. I was hoping we could talk. She glanced down. Dr. Corbett has no open appointments today. Lucky for both of us, I'm not here for him. I'm here for you. She set the coffee down slowly. I don't give interviews. Then think of it as a friendly chat, off the record about Wednesdays and Fridays. That got her attention. Just a flicker, a minute tightening of her jawline. I'm busy. Not too busy. Not for 5 minutes. And not if you want to make sure the man paying your salary doesn't wind up in Bellevue. Or worse. A long silence. Then, to my surprise, she stood. Come with me. She led me down a short hallway to a filing room the size of a generous broom closet, dim, quiet, and far enough from the waiting room to ensure privacy. She shut the door and turned. I don't know what you're looking for, she said, but something's been wrong for weeks. I just didn't know how to say it without sounding crazy. I leaned against the wall. Try me. She folded her arms. Dr. Corbett forgets things, not just small things, big ones, like whether he even had certain patients that day. A few weeks ago, he asked if Mr. E had cancelled. I told him no. Mr. E was in his office for 45 minutes. Corbett looked blank, like I'd told him aliens dropped by. Does he take notes? He used to. Handwritten, Then he switched to audio. I saw him plug one of those pen recorders into his office wall a few times. Did he ever forget to hit a record? Not that I know of, but there's more. Go on. 3 weeks ago, I came in early on a Friday. I always unlock at 8:30, but that morning I had a dentist appointment, so I got in at 7:45 to set things up before leaving again. When I came in, the front door was already unlocked. I raised an eyebrow. Sure it wasn't Corbett? She shook her head. His keys were still on the hook behind the desk. He always forgets them. That's how I know. And the inner door, the one to the office, it was ajar. You check the place. I didn't want to be dramatic, but I looked around. Nothing seemed out of place. Then I noticed a file drawer open, one Corbett hadn't used in months. A folder inside was missing. I assumed he'd just forgotten it. You didn't ask? Would you, if your boss already looked like he was unravelling? Fair. I crossed my arms. Do you know anything about Mr. E? No last name, right? She hesitated again. No, he's private. Books by phone, pays in cash, always on time. Average height, dark glasses, soft voice. Never give more than a first initial. How long has he been coming? About 8 months. Always Fridays at 10 a.m. Did Dr. Corbett ever seem unsettled after Mr. E left? I don't know if it was me or the day in general, but Fridays are always harder. He looks tired, slow, like something drains him. Did you ever hear what they talked about? I don't eavesdrop, she snapped. But once, when I stepped in to deliver coffee, Mr. E was speaking softly. I mean really softly. Almost like he was coaching Corbett, not the other way around. That froze me for a beat. Coaching? She nodded. He was saying something like, "Let's return to that moment again, Doctor. Just breathe. Now tell me what you felt when she stood up." It didn't sound like therapy. It sounded like manipulation. Now we are cooking, and the cleaning staff. They come Tuesdays and Thursdays, 6 p.m. Corbett's out by then. Ide exhaled. Marjorie, you just bought yourself a bouquet of orchids, wolf style. She frowned. Is that a good thing? It's the best we've got. I returned to the brownstone, with the sense that someone had opened a small, dangerous crack in a wall and was waiting for us to peer inside. Wolf was, predictably, rereading a copy of Oenothera, The Evening Primrose in Cultivation. I dropped into the red leather chair and gave him the highlights. The unlocked office, the missing file, the strange tone of Mr. E's sessions, the hypnotic suggestion. He set the book down slowly. Mr. E is not a patient, he said. You think he's a manipulator. Or a puppeteer. Dr. Corbett's symptoms, the memory loss, disorientation, mood decay, are not typical of physical illness, but they are consistent with progressive mental conditioning. Someone is training him to forget, to doubt, possibly even to confess. To what? That, Wolf said darkly, is the question. I stood and poured him a glass of beer. What next? Bring in the wife, Lillian? He nodded, under pretense. Say we've made progress and require her assistance to cross-reference the dates of Andrew's confusion with her own observations. And what will you do? He gave me a thin smile. I intend to ask her about something she did not mention in our first meeting. The woman who stood up. From the recording? From the memory Mr. E tried to extract. If Lillian planted Mr. E, we'll see it in her eyes. And if she didn't? then she's as much a victim as her husband. I headed for the phone to set up the meeting. Wolf sipped his beer slowly, eyes drifting toward the window. Outside, the city roared as always. Cabs, pigeons, people, yelling about bagels. But inside our brownstone, something quiet and precise was taking shape. A memory was missing, and we were about to find out why someone wanted it erased. Chapter 5. The Woman Who Knew Too Much. Lillian Corbett arrived just after 5, wearing the same navy coat she'd worn during her first visit, but this time she carried herself differently. Less urgency, more calculation. She greeted me at the door with a nod, and I led her into the office, where Wolf sat behind his desk, hands folded like a cathedral gargoyle, contemplating judgment. "Mrs. Corbett," Wolf said without preamble, "thank you for coming again." She gave a polite smile. "You said there was progress." "There is movement," he said. "Whether it constitutes progress remains to be seen. Please sit." She did, legs crossed, gloved hands folded neatly in her lap. I took my place in the red armchair, notebook in hand, ready to observe. "We're attempting," Wolf continued, "to chart your husband's disorientation against a temporal pattern. You claimed previously that the symptoms worsened on specific days, Wednesdays and Fridays. We now know the names of the patients he sees then. What we seek is correlation." Her brow tightened. "You think one of them is doing this to him?" "That is one possibility. I don't see how. His patients come in, talk, and leave. They don't slip something into his tea." "No," Wolf said, "but perhaps one of them is not truly a patient." That made her blink. "We believe," he continued, "that your husband's sessions with an individual known only as Mr. E have a deleterious effect on his cognition. More than once, following these meetings, he has exhibited memory loss, confusion and anxiety." She looked down. "He mentioned forgetting things. He thought it was stressful." "Mrs. Corbett," Wolf said, voice sharpening, "when you began sessions under a pseudonym with your own husband, were you aware that one of his other patients was engaging in psychological manipulation?" Her head jerked up. "No, What do you mean, manipulation?" "Mr. E's behaviour resembles that of someone administering hypnotic suggestions. Not therapy, control. He does not seek help. He seeks dominance. Your husband is being conditioned." A long silence followed. Lillian's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. A flicker of fear, or maybe guilt. "Didn't know," she said softly. "Andrew never mentioned it, and I never suspected. Do you think this man is trying to destroy him?" "That depends," Wolf said. "Was there a moment your husband mentioned recently? A memory he dwelled on, or perhaps tried to suppress? Something that may explain the phrase, 'the patient who wasn't sick'?" She hesitated. "There was a name. About 3 months ago, he mentioned a woman, Angela. He said she'd stopped coming in suddenly, that she'd left town, but something felt unfinished. He never told me what they discussed, only that it unsettled him." I leaned forward. "Angela? Full name?" "I don't know. I only overheard the first name. But I do know she had a standing appointment. Wednesday mornings before Ruth Denning. And then nothing." "And your husband didn't replace her with another patient?" "No. Her slot stayed open for weeks." Wolf steepled his fingers. You understand, of course, the implication. She looked between us. That she's the memory they're trying to erase? Possibly. Or something she revealed. If Mr. E is not targeting Andrew randomly, then Angela may have been a trigger. The pivot in this unravelling. I added, do you remember? Anything else about her? Voice? Age? She was young, 25 maybe. Soft-spoken. I only saw her once in passing. Wolf turned to me. Archie, I want that client list. The one from 2 months ago. If Angela's name was scrubbed, we'll find the gap. Already on it. Lillian stood. What happens next? Wolf's gaze settled on her. You go home. If Andrew exhibits any sudden behaviour, especially following another Friday session, you notify us at once. Do not confront him. Do not raise suspicion. Whoever is behind this wants his collapse to appear organic. We must give them rope, she nodded, and if they pull it tight. Then we cut it, I said. She left soon after, walking slower this time, more aware of the trap tightening around her husband. That evening, I pulled some strings through. A guy I knew in Midtown who once installed a panic room for a paranoid billionaire psychiatrist. 2 calls later, I had access to a temp database of Corbett's former patients. The current month was spotless, but September, 3 months prior, had a listing for Angela Curran. Wednesdays, 10 a.m. Requested non-disclosure terminated. Sessions abruptly. There was no forwarding number, no notes, no record of referral, just a name and a disappearance. I brought it to Wolf, who scanned the page and then set it down slowly. Angela Curran, he said. The missing patient, the unwelcome memory, and likely the witness to something Mr. E cannot afford to be remembered. I nodded. You want me to find her? Before someone else ensures she remains unfound. Wolf leaned back, eyes closed in thought. We have a name, a time, and a pattern. We're close, Archie, very close. And what if Mr. E knows we're poking around? Wolf opened his eyes. Then let us make sure he knows. I want him to feel watched. Pressure reveals the cracks. He poured another glass of beer and lifted it with ceremony. To the memory that won't stay buried. Chapter 6. The woman who walked out of the file by 10 a.m. the next morning. I was walking past the chipped iron gate of a 3-story walk-up in Astoria, Queens, the kind of place where rent was still negotiable, and your neighbours either baked too much or fought too loud. According to the lead I'd pulled off Corbett's scrubbed patient records, and a lucky tip from a janitor with a grudge, Angela Curran had once listed this address as her emergency contact for insurance forms, which she never filled out completely. She wasn't in the building directory. No surprise there, but there was a 3rd-floor unit with a taped-over nameplate, and I'd bet Wolf's orchid allowance belonged to the missing patient who wasn't supposed to be remembered. I knocked. No answer. Knocked again. Still nothing. So I leaned on the oldest New York trick in the book. I waited. 3 doors down, an older woman in a pink robe was watering her windowsill violets. Miss Curran, I said, raising my voice just enough to carry. She looked up like a suspicious cat. Moved out months ago. Did she say where? No, the watering can be tilted. But someone still checks her mailbox. Every Saturday morning. Same. Man never talks. Dark glasses. Smells like cologne and cheap cigarettes. Mr. E, I thought. Thanks, ma'am. Have you ever seen the girl since she left? She paused. Once, in February, middle of the night. She came back for something. Looked scared. She saw me, then left again, fast. I gave her a smile and a salute, and headed back to the brownstone, with the name a near confirmation of Angela's retreat, and a fresh note of tension humming in my ribs. Wolf, naturally, was mid-breakfast when I returned. He was dissecting a poached egg like it had personally insulted his ancestors. Fritz hovered nearby, looking pleased with the hollandaise. I dropped into my chair. She's alive. Or was. Angela Curran. Moved out 3 months ago. No forwarding. Neighbour says she came back once, scared stiff, and someone's been checking her mailbox. Wolf glanced up. Describe him. Male, average height, dark glasses, cigarettes stink. Sounds like our Mr. E. He made a satisfied grunt. So she is being watched. Good. That confirms her importance. I'd say it confirms she's terrified and someone wants her out of reach. Semantics, Wolf replied. I slid the notebook across his desk. Now what? He took a thoughtful bite of toast, then turned toward the phone. Now, we call in a favour. 2 hours later, Inspector Kramer arrived like a thundercloud in a brown overcoat. He'd barely crossed the threshold before he growled, Wolf, if this is another bee sting masquerading as a murder, I swear it's a psychological assault. Wolf cut in smoothly. One that may soon result in death. That stopped him. Whose? Dr. Andrew Corbett, I said, walking him through the broad strokes, the memory gaps, Mr. E's strange therapeutic inversions, Angela's sudden disappearance. By the time I got to the missing audio files and the midnight mailbox prowler, Kramer's eyebrows had taken up permanent residence in his hairline. Do you have proof of any of this? Enough to make you twitch, I said. Give me the address, Kramer muttered, pulling a small pad from his inner pocket. I'll send someone to sit in the building. Wolf cleared his throat. Not to arrest. Not yet. Merely to observe. If Angela is hiding from her manipulator, we must ensure she does not believe the police are allied with him. You think Mr. E's that careful? I think, Wolf said, he's already tried to erase 2 memories. One is Angela, one in Corbett, which means his next move will not be subtle. Kramer stood. You better be right, Wolf, because if you're wrong, and I waste manpower on a head shrinker who forgot where he put his briefcase, I'll make you eat one of those orchids. Wolf gave a thin smile. You may bring the sauce. Kramer left, muttering all the way down the steps. That evening, I returned to Corbett's office with one simple goal. Tail Mr. E. Friday. 10 a.m. I waited in a deli across the street, nursing a cup of weak coffee, and watching the building entrance through a plate-glass window, smudged with ambition and fingerprints. Right on cue, he showed. Average height, black coat, dark glasses even in the morning light, and a gait so casual it looked rehearsed. He buzzed in. I gave him 5 minutes, then followed. The building was quiet, carpeted to muffle everything. I crouched outside Corbett's suite, careful not to shadow the frosted glass, and listened. A low voice. Not Corbett's. Smooth, deliberate. Now breathe, Doctor. Let's return to that place again. You remember, don't you? The garden. The woman with the red scarf. A long silence. Then Corbett's voice. Hoarse. I don't want to. Good, said the other voice. That means we're close. Another pause. Then the sound of something being unzipped. Fabric, maybe a bag. I couldn't hear more. But the tone sent a prickle up the back of my neck. I stepped back, memorized the exit, route and left before either of them did. Wolf would want a play-by-play, and I wanted my distance. Back at the brownstone, Wolf listened with narrowed eyes as I recited every word. "The woman with the red scarf," he said softly. "Angela? Likely. Or someone Angela saw. Either way, Mr. E wants it gone. What do we do now?" Wolf's eyes gleamed. "Now we do something unspeakably crass, Archie. Which is? We lay bait. You will draft a letter, typewritten, unsigned. We will send it to Dr. Corbett's office. What's it say?" He leaned forward, voice velvet smooth. "Angela never left the city. She remembers the red scarf. You were there. We know. Soon everyone else will too." I gave a low whistle. "You want to provoke him. I want to corner him. And if he bites, then Mr. E will make a mistake." Wolf leaned back, folding his hands. "And in that mistake, Archie, lies our only chance to unmask him." Chapter 7. The Trap in the Envelope. By the time Saturday rolled around, the letter was printed on off-white stock, typewritten in courier to avoid any personal flair, and sealed in a blank envelope. Wolf didn't allow even a fingerprint. On the fold, Fritz delivered it with the precision of a clockmaker, left on Corbett's desk by mid-morning under the guise of a medical flyer drop-off. If Mr. E showed up for his usual mailbox run, he'd find it waiting. And he did. At 10:06 a.m., the man in the black coat arrived on schedule, entered the building with a key, an interesting detail that, and slipped into the lobby. I watched, from a bakery window across the street, pretending to read the post while the door mirror gave me everything I needed. He checked the box, found the envelope, hesitated, then he turned it over. Twice, and pocketed it, didn't open it, just vanished back into the stairwell like a whisper. I was already dialing. Back at the brownstone, Wolf was pruning a cluster of Paphiopedilum orchids, with the kind of care usually reserved for antique Fabergé eggs. He didn't read it, he asked when I finished reporting. Nope, not even a peek. Then he's cautious, or he already knew what it would say. Wolf returned the shears to the workbench, which means the message served its purpose. It confirmed Angela's memory is a threat. And now we wait. That would have been a fine plan, except Mr. E didn't wait. He acted. Sunday morning came with fog and a phone call. I answered on the second ring. Lillian Corbett's voice was low and tight, like it had been wrung dry. Andrew collapsed. That snapped me upright. He's in St. Luke's, she said. The doctors think it's exhaustion and dehydration, but I know better. He was fine last night, and this morning he didn't recognize me. Did he say anything? One word, over and over. I braced. What word? Angela. I was out the door 5 minutes later. Corbett looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. He lay under hospital linen with his eyes sunken and glazed, like a man who'd been dropped between realities and hadn't landed yet. His lips moved, dry and soundless, until the nurse dabbed water against them. He blinked once, slowly, and turned his head toward me. Angela. Doctor, I said gently, do you remember the scarf? His body tensed. His hands gripped the sheet. She stood up, he whispered. I leaned closer. She stood up and she saw him. She saw his back arched suddenly. Machines beeped. A nurse rushed in. I was pushed back, out of the way, while the hospital ballet spun into motion. I watched as Corbett trembled, eyes wide, lips forming silent words. Something had shattered inside him, and I'd bet my last clean shirt it wasn't from dehydration. Back at the brownstone, Wolf listened without interrupting. When I finished, he opened a fresh bottle of beer and poured it into his oversized glass with ceremonial gravity. Mr. E panicked, he said. He attempted to erase Corbett's mind completely. The letter triggered it. He believes Angela still knows, which means Angela is still alive and dangerous. But she's also in the wind. I've asked around. No bank activity, no phone records, nothing recent. She's gone deep. Then we flush her out, Wolf said. We use what's left of Corbett's memory. I frowned. You want to bait her? No. We make her feel safe. You will leak discreetly that Dr. Corbett is recovering and requesting her, that he remembers everything, that he wants to ensure she's protected. That'll make Mr. E squirm. It will make him move, and when he does, we'll follow. That night, I made the call. I knew a guy at the New York Ledger, tabloid side, who owed me 2 favors and a bourbon bottle. By morning, a quiet item ran in the Metro column. Prominent Upper East Side psychiatrist recovers from health scare. Requests to speak to a missing client in connection with an unresolved ethical concern. Sources close to the family confirm the client's name. Angela Curran. It was small, buried between a subway crime blotter and a puff piece on imported coffee beans, but it would find the right eyes. By noon, Wolf had a visitor. Not Angela, not Lillian, not even Kramer. It was a man we hadn't seen before. 40-ish, close-cut hair. Plain black suit. He introduced himself only as Mr. Kell. Said he represented a client concerned with patient confidentiality. Wolf, to his credit, barely raised an eyebrow. My client, said Kell, asks that you cease inquiries into Miss Curran. She is no longer of consequence. She is of consequence to me, Wolf replied. Then I'll be frank, said Kell. You're being paid to solve a problem, not to reopen others. Let Corbett recover. Let Angela vanish. And if I don't? Kell's smile was thin. Then we all lose something. I saw Wolf's eyes glint, the kind of glint that said, You've just made a very large mistake, sir. Good day, Wolf said, standing. Kell nodded once, turned, and left. I shut the door behind him and muttered, Well, that's subtle. Wolf lowered himself back into the chair and steepled his fingers. We've just been warned off, Archie, which means we're right where we should be. He nodded. Now, he said softly, we need only find the woman who remembers what no one else is allowed to. Chapter 8. The girl in the photograph, Wolf, didn't like coincidences. He barely tolerated them when they were dressed in logic and served with evidence on a silver platter. So the sudden arrival of Mr. Kell, polished, composed, and clearly sent by the kind of people who never signed their real names, had confirmed one thing. The memory Angela carried wasn't just inconvenient, it was incriminating. Archie, Wolf said that evening, as Fritz cleared the dinner plates, we must find Angela before they do. We are no longer dealing with a psychological grudge. This is a cover-up." I nodded, which means we need a lead. Fast. Wolf drummed his fingers once on the desk. Angela Curran disappeared, but not into nothing. She was scared, not vanished. No one erases themselves completely unless they're trained. You think she had help? I think she ran somewhere familiar. That was all the hint I needed. The next morning, I headed to the Museum of Modern Art about Ruth Denning. The first of Corbett's Wednesday patients had slipped under our radar for being too normal. But something had bothered me about her from the start. The way she answered the phone too quickly, too smoothly, and more importantly, the fact that she worked in archives, which meant she was good at making things disappear. I tracked her, down between gallery shifts, cornered her in a quiet corridor, surrounded by grey abstract canvases and the scent of varnish. "Miss Denning," I said, stepping into her path. "You remember me?" She did. Her eyes flicked to the side, but she didn't bolt. "I told you everything I knew. I think you told me what you wanted me to know." She raised a brow. "Is this about Andrew?" Among other things, her lips pressed together. I already told the hospital I couldn't visit. "This isn't about visiting, it's about Angela Curran." That stopped her. She looked at me for a long moment, then whispered, "She's not safe." I nodded. "That's why I need to find her." Another pause. Then she reached into her bag and handed me a small envelope. I didn't know what to do with it. She mailed it to me after she vanished. No return address, just this photo. Inside was a faded snapshot, grainy, shot on old film. It showed 3 people at a garden table. Dr. Corbett, a younger woman I recognized as Angela from the hospital file, and a third figure with his back to the camera. Barely visible. Dark coat, sunglasses, a hand resting on Angela's shoulder. "Shh, did him. You know who the third man is?" She hesitated. She called him Mr. Easton. Said he was a therapist she was seeing on the side. But I think he was more than that. She said he told her things. Things she couldn't remember afterward. Hypnosis? She never used the word. But once she said, he walks inside your thoughts like they're a library. That haunted me. I nodded slowly. Where was this taken? Inwood, the community garden near Payson Avenue, last June. I left her standing there under an abstract sculpture that looked like a crushed clock and raced back to the brownstone. Wolf studied the photograph with a scowl. Not much detail, but posture suggests control. He is not a guest at that table. He's the author of it. Angela's gone silent. Ruth's afraid. Corbett's nearly broken. Everyone this guy touches ends up scrambled. Wolf's fingers drummed again. We are looking for a man who controls memory. A psychological manipulator who erases traces as he goes, which means he's worked before. Precisely. Run his name, Easton, through every clinic registry you can find. Check for aliases. Track hypnosis specialists. See if any of them were dismissed. Silenced. Got it. I spent the rest of the day on the phone. By evening, I had a hit, a man named Leonard Easton, licensed as a hypnotherapist in upstate New York, had quietly left a practice in Yonkers 3 years ago. No explanation, no lawsuit, just gone. His last known session was with a patient who later filed a sealed complaint. Guess what the patient claimed? That she'd confessed to something she didn't remember doing. "Wolf," I said, stepping into the office as the light dimmed. Our mystery man used to work 6 blocks from Angela's old apartment. He had a license. Then he vanished. Leonard Easton. Same build, same name. Wolf didn't even blink. He used to guide patients through memories. Now he rewrites them. A perfect predator in the guise of a healer. And now he thinks Angela's memory could undo everything. Wolf stood, rare for him, which meant we were past theory. She must be located immediately, and if we can't find her before he does... Wolf looked at me, his expression cold and final. Then we expose him without her. We show the pattern, the manipulation. We make it impossible for him to touch another mind. I nodded. And we bait the final trap. Yes, Archie, one that even Mr. Easton won't see coming. Chapter 9. A mind too dangerous to keep it was nearly midnight when Wolf called Inspector Kramer. He rarely reached for the phone himself. Usually I'm the one stuck dialing and smoothing feathers. But this wasn't a time for diplomacy. This was war. And Wolf, for all his resistance to movement, knew when to launch the first strike. Kramer answered on the second ring, already gravelly with suspicion. "What is it now, Wolf? We have a name," Wolf said flatly. "Leonard Easton. Former hypnotherapist, disgraced. Operating under an alias, Mr. E. He is manipulating Dr. Andrew Corbett and may be involved in the disappearance of a patient named Angela Curran. Do you have proof?" "I have a photograph, 2 witness statements, and a man in a hospital bed who can barely say his own name." Silence. "Where is Easton now?" Kramer asked. "That," Wolf replied, "is what you're going to help us find out." The next morning, Wolf had the brownstone buzzing like a covert war room. He'd sent me to the post office first thing, not to mail a letter, but to intercept one. "Angela will have written to someone," Wolf had said. "Someone she trusts. She wouldn't be foolish enough to use her name. But we'll catch it by the pattern. Frequency, weight, destination." Sure enough, after 3 cups of blackmail-laced charm and a $20 handshake, a clerk in a wrinkled tie handed over the logs from their outbound stack. A name stood out, Anna Cummings. 3 handwritten letters in the last 8 weeks, all from the same mailbox Angela once used. 1 to Detroit, 1 to Albany, and 1, the most recent, to Watertown, New York. Wolf lit up when I read the name. "Watertown," he murmured. "Far enough to vanish, small enough to avoid surveillance. She's hiding there." Should I go? Immediately. I arrived in Watertown by afternoon. The return address from the postal logs led to a small clapboard house off Glen Street. Brown shutters, white trim, the kind of place with bird feeders and wind chimes and curtains. Drawn just a bit too carefully, I didn't knock right away. I watched, waited, and at 4:03 p.m. the door opened. Angela Curran stepped out, carrying a watering can. She looked thinner, paler, but unmistakably her. I stepped out of the rental car slowly, hands raised halfway. "Miss Curran," I said, "my name's Archie Goodwin. I'm not here to hurt you." She froze. The can trembled. "I don't want to talk to anyone." "Dr. Corbett is in the hospital. Leonard Easton put him there, and he'll come for you next." That landed. Her face crumpled, but she didn't cry. She just walked back inside. A minute later, The door opened again. 10 minutes, she said. That's all you get. Inside, the house smelled of chamomile and dust. She led me to a small sitting room, plain and neat, where a photograph of her parents sat next to a copy of Jane Eyre, with pages folded in like a paper diary. You don't know what he is, she said. I have a guess. No, you don't. He doesn't just plant thoughts. He takes things away. I lost 2 days after our 3rd session. Gone. Like they never existed. And when I tried to ask questions, he came to my apartment. He told me I'd never be safe unless I left. Why were you seeing him to begin with? She hesitated. I was afraid. I thought I'd seen something. In Corbett's office, a client yelling, a man with a scarf over his hand. I thought maybe I imagined it. So I talked to Corbett. Then Mr. Easton introduced himself, said he was a colleague, said he could help me clarify. Did you? I remembered, she said softly. I remembered that the man wasn't yelling. He was threatening. Corbett was scared, but the man, he smiled, like he was testing something. She swallowed. It was Easton, but he made me forget. And the moment I remembered again, he came to erase it. Do you remember what he said to Corbett? Just one thing. We need you to forget her, completely. That was enough. Angela, I said, we need you to come back. Not for Wolfe, not even for Corbett, but because this man is still practicing, still erasing. If we don't stop him now, someone else vanishes. She stared out the window, then stood. I'll come, but on one condition. Name it. I want to see Corbett. I want him to know he wasn't crazy. Back in Manhattan, Wolfe prepared the final move. Angela arrived under a fake name and wore a scarf pulled high around her face. Fritz escorted her inside like she was royalty. Wolfe stood to greet her. One of only 3 times I'd seen him do that for a client. Miss Curran, he said, we will protect you. But your story must be told clearly and precisely. If you can do that, Easton will fall. Angela sat, composed now, older than her age, sharper. He made me forget once, she said. I won't let him do it again. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, fetch Inspector Kramer, and call Dr. Corbett's physician. Arrange a visit for Miss Curran under police protection. And then, Wolfe said, I will gather our final pieces. Once the board is set, we will invite Mr. Easton to join us. He paused, smiling faintly. In the one room he can't control, mine. Chapter 10. The mind games in Wolfe's office. By the time I returned from fetching Kramer, Wolfe had already rearranged the office. A rare event, usually reserved for confrontations of theatrical proportions. The guest chair Angela Curran, now occupied, had been angled slightly off-centre, not quite facing Wolfe, not quite facing the empty chair across from her. Wolfe's desk had been cleared, save for a single sheet of thick cream paper and his fountain pen, uncapped and ready. That was his equivalent of loading a revolver. Angela sat stiff-backed but not trembling. She had seen the worst of Leonard, Easton, and the fact that she was still here meant she was stronger than Wolfe had initially assumed. Kramer arrived 10 minutes later, his usual grumbling temporarily muted when he spotted Angela and recognized the weight of the moment. Wolfe, he muttered, folding his arms. This had better be real. Wolf gestured toward the vacant chair across from Angela. "Mr. Easton will be here shortly. I invited him personally." "You what?" "I told him Miss Curran was here, that she had remembered, that she had told us everything, and that I would be presenting it to you, Inspector." Kramer's eyes bulged. "You invited a suspect into your home?" Wolf merely sipped his beer. "I invited a man who believes he cannot be touched, who thinks we are merely fumbling in the dark." "He's dangerous." "Which is why you're here," Wolf said. "And why Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins is outside, in a police car, watching the door." Angela looked up. "What do I say when he comes in?" "You don't need to say anything," Wolf replied. "You only need to remember. There was a buzz at the front door. I opened it. Leonard Easton, Mr. E., stepped into the brownstone like a man entering a boardroom. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, dark glasses, and the self-possession of someone used to sitting closer to power than morality. His eyes flicked from me to Wolf to Angela, whose scarf was now removed. He paused, just enough to register surprise. Then he smiled. "Miss Curran, you look well." Angela didn't move. Easton turned toward Wolf. "So, I suppose this is the part where you accuse me of something vague and melodramatic." "No," Wolf said coolly. "This is the part where I let your own voice betray you." I stepped forward and pressed play on the small portable recorder Wolf had set on the side table. Corbett's voice filled the room, faint and trembling. She stood up. "The scarf, the garden. You said I had to forget. You said it wasn't real." Then Easton's voice, soft and sharp like a scalpel. "Good. That means we're close. Let's go back again. Let her vanish." Angela flinched. Kramer's jaw tightened. Easton's smile twitched. "I'd be careful," he said slowly. "You're treading close to slander." Wolf ignored the jab. "Mr. Easton, allow me to be perfectly clear. You entered Dr. Corbett's professional space under false pretenses. You engaged in coercive psychological techniques that led directly to his mental collapse. You erased memory, tampered with perception, and threatened Miss Curran into fleeing the city." Easton took a measured breath. "You have no idea what you're playing with." "On the contrary," Wolf said, rising to his full height, not towering by any means, but with a presence that could crush the air out of the room. "You're a fraud, a manipulator. You preyed on vulnerable minds to conceal a truth we now possess." Easton's facade cracked, just slightly. He glanced at Angela. "She doesn't remember all of it, just fragments." Angela spoke for the first time. Her voice was steady. "But I remember enough. I remember the scarf. I remember your hand on Corbett's shoulder. I remember what you made him say." Easton's jaw worked silently. Then Wolf dropped the final piece. "No," Wolf said, eyes still closed, "but you may bring me another beer." Chapter 11. The Wounds That Memory. Leaves by the following afternoon, the brownstone was eerily quiet. No phone ringing, no Fritz humming over his broth. Wolf hadn't emerged from the plant room since breakfast. I knew better than to interrupt him when he was pruning orchids after a case. It was his ritual detox, a slow recentering of his own psyche, after venturing too deep into someone else's. I, however, had a different habit. I needed to move, so I walked. downtown, I passed the grey hush of St. Luke's, where Dr. Corbett was now slowly regaining his mind under the supervision of real physicians. They said he was lucid, though his short-term memory still played tricks on him. Wolfe had predicted as much. Undoing psychological sabotage didn't happen in a day. I was halfway through a soggy pretzel on the hospital steps when I spotted Lillian Corbett exiting the lobby. Her posture was a little straighter now. She wore a different coat, lighter in colour, looser at the shoulders. It might have been hope, or just a better tailor. She saw me, paused. Then I walked over. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly. "Both of you." "You can thank Wolfe by not sending him any more orchid books," I said. "He has no shelf space left." She managed a smile. "Andrew remembered my name today. That's more than I expected." Did he remember Angela? Her expression darkened. He remembers something. A room, a voice. He said he felt like he'd been given a different life, then forced to forget it. I nodded. That sounds like Easton's signature. She looked down. He trusted him, you know, though he was a consultant, a referral from one of his patients. Gordon Bell? She shook her head. No, Ruth Denning. That stopped me. Denning, she said Easton was helping her with repressed memories. She thought Corbett could benefit from the same techniques. And just like that, another piece clicked into place. I walked her to the cab and tipped my hat as she left. Then I called Wolfe. He picked up, which meant I had his attention. "Ruth Denning," I said. She was the bridge. Easton came in through her. "I suspected as much," Wolfe replied. He needed a thread to weave his way into Corbett's trust. Denning provided it, perhaps unknowingly. "She's due another visit. Leave it," Wolfe said. "Let the police handle her now. Kramer's claws are deep enough to drag her in for questioning. Any deeper, and she'll confess just to save face." I returned to the brownstone as the sky went pale with the kind of New York dusk that makes the buildings look taller than they are. Wolfe was in his chair, reading On Memory and Consciousness by William James, a thick tome he only dusted off when cases grazed the metaphysical. "I still don't get it," I said. "Why go after Corbett in the first place? Why manipulate him?" Wolfe looked over the rim of his spectacles. "Because he was the only one who noticed." "Noticed what?" "That Easton wasn't helping people. He was rewriting them. Smoothing out inconvenient truths, turning patients into puzzles only he could solve." I sat across from him. "And Angela?" She saw the original picture before he could retouch it. Why not kill her? Wolfe raised an eyebrow. "Because memory, like guilt, has a habit of resurfacing. A dead woman can't forget, but a frightened one, she can be convinced to never remember." I whistled low. "Do you think he'll crack under questioning?" "Eventually. Men like Easton believe themselves immune, but when the lies unravel, their mind turns against itself." I stood. Still, not our mess anymore. Wolfe made a non-committal grunt. "No, but it will leave marks." That night, I sat in my room and reviewed everything. The fake sessions, the planted thoughts, a scarf in a garden, a frightened girl, a collapsing man. Easton hadn't just committed a crime. He'd rearranged people like furniture, confident no one would ever notice a chair out of place. But Wolfe noticed. and for once so did I. Chapter 12. The Mind Reclaimed. 3 days after Easton's arrest, Inspector Kramer returned to the brownstone. No warrant, no shouting, just a quiet knock and a coat that smelled faintly of stale courtroom air and cheap police coffee. Wolf was already seated in the office, a fresh beer on his desk, and the final orchid of the morning rotation still, cradled in its porcelain pot. Kramer dropped a folder on the desk. "You win." Wolf didn't even look up. "Naturally," he cracked. "Not completely, but enough." Said Corbett got too close. That Angela saw something he couldn't afford anyone to remember. So he erased it. Wolf finally turned the page of his book. And how did he justify it? He didn't, Kramer said. Said he was helping. Said some people are better off with their pain curated. Wolf's lip curled. The arrogance of self-appointed surgeons of the mind. He kept records, Kramer added. Not full names, but code books, symbols, notes on modifications. The DA thinks they'll be able to charge him with a laundry list. And the woman? Wolf asked. Angela's safe. States. Witness protection for now. Her testimony's key. I walked Kramer to the door after that. He paused at the threshold. You know, he said, guys like Easton. They don't use knives. They use trust. Quiet. Surgical. Hard to see. Even harder to prove. You two cracked this one. I nodded. We just made sure someone was listening, grunted, and disappeared down the steps. Later that day, Lillian Corbett called. Andrew's improving, she said. He's remembering things on his own now. Snippets at first, but today he asked about his orchids. That's progress, I said. She hesitated. He asked if he ever hurt anyone. I didn't answer right away. He didn't. He was manipulated, used. I know, but he still feels responsible. For what happened to Angela, for letting Easton get close. Tell him this, I said. Wolf's had worse clients, but never one more wronged. She didn't speak for a moment. Then, thank you. That evening, Wolf and I shared dinner in a rare quiet. No arguments over sauce, no lectures on beer temperature, just the clink of silverware and the low hum of radio static from the kitchen. You know, I said finally, Easton nearly got away with it. No, Wolf corrected. He relied on silence, in absence. But truth, Mr. Goodwin, has a peculiar resilience. It festers when buried. And sometimes, I added, it grows teeth. Wolf gave the faintest nod. Outside, the city moved on. People forgot. The way they always do, news cycled, headlines faded. But in one small brownstone, with its orchids and its monastic rituals, the memory was preserved, because someone had to remember. Because Wolf always does. And me, I just make sure it gets written down.